Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight on this beautiful night. So I want to get us started because I know that there's a lot going on in the world right now and you have a lot of things on your plate. So I'm just so excited to introduce you to somebody who is so fantastic in the world, and everybody should have the chance to get to know Lael. So Lael, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. Lael is a health and life coach and a former therapist and just all-around fantastic person with really great advice. So I've got a pen and paper ready. I'm going to be writing down everything she says. Every time I get the chance to talk with her, I feel like I'm taking notes. So thank all of you for coming tonight. I do want you to know that this is being recorded. So if you live in a house like mine, you're going to want to make sure to have your mute button on. At any moment, one of my kids could be blasting in here, screaming for a quesadilla or something. So you're going to want to make sure that you have your mute on unless you want this recorded for the world. So this will be recorded and placed on our wellness page, which is where all of our events are recorded and then archived. So if you miss it, or if you have a friend that you're like, oh my gosh, you should have seen this, just lead them to our CSD wellness page. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lael.
Oh, thank you. Doesn't everybody need a hype person like Jennifer in the morning, just like pumping you up? I love it. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. I have some great intentions for this evening, but I also know myself well enough to know that we're just going to kind of go with the flow. So I have some things prepared, and we'll also see what arises. Jennifer introduced me. Yes, I was a therapist for many, many years, and now I'm a life coach. There's a difference. And what I get to do now is really work with people in a way that I wasn't able to do as a therapist. And I do some group coaching and some one-on-one coaching. But my experience is really grounded in being a therapist for many, many years. I also come to you tonight as someone who has 2 children who are also doing online learning. And so I can relate to some of what's going on as a parent with 2 fifth grade girls who are managing their online learning as well. My intention for tonight is to talk at you a bit and not necessarily about how to set up a learning space or how to communicate effectively with teachers. I'm assuming that at this point in the game, we've kind of figured some of that out. But what I'm hearing from families at this stage is needing some support around making sense of what's happening and putting what's happening into context. What I'm hearing from families is there's a lot of concern about the impact this experience is having on their children. The novelty and the newness of it all is long worn off. And parents are struggling. They're struggling with the task of managing and helping their kids with learning. And the kids are struggling. And so I really want to look at that not as a solution or as a problem to be solved tonight, but as a way to perhaps explore perspective. Because I know that when parents are in a better frame of mind, and you all know this as well, we're so much more available and present to manage what's arising for our kids. So we're going to talk a little bit about mindset. We're going to talk a little bit about perspective. And then I'm going to walk you through a process to just kind of get back in touch with what's really important for your family, because so often we get off course in these really, really challenging times. And it's helpful to kind of go back to what's really important for your family, despite what's happening around us. You are welcome to use the chat window. I don't know how your group typically rolls, but I'm totally fine if you use the chat window if you want to comment, if that helps you stay engaged. And I will pause for questions throughout, and also at the end, we'll have a little bit of time to touch base and ask any questions if there was anything that didn't get addressed or if you want to talk more about. So what I'd like to do is just start with you guys by acknowledging the complexity and stress of the current situation. And now that might seem kind of obvious, but here's what I know, is that oftentimes we don't really let ourselves fuss or complain or really give voice to how difficult this situation has been. And the reason I think that's so important is that we often want to gloss things over because we're worried that somehow if we acknowledge what's happening, we'll fall apart or our children will fall apart. But the message that gives is that what's happening is not, there's not emotions to be had about it. And I don't think that's true. So if we don't really acknowledge and name what's happening, then oftentimes those feelings can get projected onto innocent bystanders, such as yelling at teachers for things that they are doing their best at, or getting frustrated with our kids because we're not managing our own emotions. And as our anxiety rises, right, we know that that has an impact on our children because our children are really the barometer for our family. There's been a lot of disappointment, and I think it's just important to acknowledge that. So some of you might be really good at naming that, and some of you might not have given yourself permission yet to just give voice to what has been difficult. I also want to remind you that the only way through what we're going through is by going through it. And I know that might seem obvious too, like of course the only way through is through, but I am constantly reminded at how often we are engaging in ways to sort of circumvent or sidestep what's actually happening, rather than realizing the only way we're going to get through it is one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. And what that work requires, the going through it, is really requires a shift in our mindset. I don't know if you've heard this, but I imagine you have, that the problem isn't really the problem. It's our reaction to the problem. Or maybe you've heard it such as like, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And I think that's really true for a lot of us in this online school situation. In and of itself, what is happening is not terrible. And I know that might seem kind of radical because we can have a lot of opinions about what's right or wrong about what's happening. But honestly, it's not. Life has ups and downs, and it always will. It always has. But how we respond to these challenges have everything to do with our experience of them and also the meaning we make out of them. So tonight I'm going to walk you through some what I like to call mind flossing activities so that we can get really focused on what you need to do as a parent so that you can be the kind of support that your kids need for however long this is going to go on. I recently read an article that I thought was really powerful. Maybe I'll share it with Jennifer so she can share it with you guys too. It was written by a therapist and a parent. Her name was Kristen Howerton. And she said this: it's important to distinguish between things that are disappointing and things that will actually negatively impact our kids' educational, career, or their mental health. And a lot of what we interpret about what's going on hinges on that story that we're telling ourselves, and then what we're modeling for our kids. So we can give our kids one of two perspectives. We can give our kids the perspective of that we're victims, right? That they've lost everything that they're entitled to, their sports and their music and their in-classroom experiences, and that they should be outraged, right? And that they're going to be forever scarred by this experience. Or we can give them the message of empowerment. We can give them the message that sometimes there are things that we have to wait for, or sometimes we experience things in life that help us develop the resiliency we need. And maybe this situation is teaching us how to grieve and how to find meaning and new coping skills. So in that way, I don't think we need to suppress our kids' natural responses or even our own responses to what's happening right now, or even what we've lost. We need to acknowledge and work through those feelings and give our kids permission to work through them as well. And we also need to give them hope. We need to remind them that this experience is temporary, and to give them the sense that their world, while it's radically different than it was, will not be damaging for them for the rest of their lives. I think so often in our society, where we have so much privilege, that we have inadvertently oftentimes given our kids the message that they should not suffer. And if we're doing a good job as parents, then our kids shouldn't suffer at all. But if you've lived long enough, you will know that suffering and disappointment and loss are inevitable. It's just part of being human. And we can see probably times in our life where things have not gone as we expected, whether it was marriages that didn't work out, or jobs that didn't work out, or the career we thought we were going to be in, or even parenting is not what we expected it to be. But when we can learn to approach that with a sense of flexibility, and be able to let go a little bit of controlling everything, and recognize that perhaps this is an opportunity. So that's the lens through which I'm coming to you tonight, is this idea that we are in a profoundly unique experience that none of us have been through before. There's been incredible loss. I think about the seniors who didn't have graduation like they expected. I think about kindergarten kids who didn't get to start school with the same excitement that other kids have had. Middle schoolers who are starting middle school without all the rites of passage. There's a loss of field trips and dances and sports and connections, and it's really important to acknowledge those things. And also to recognize that there's a great opportunity for us and for our children. I know a little bit about the Camas School District, not a lot, but what I know is that this is a very proud community in the sense that you value and prioritize your children and your education, fantastic schools, fantastic administration. And so I can imagine that this has been a huge loss to not be engaged in your community in the way that you have done for so long. But because of that too, I also know that your community has the capacity to rise and survive this season of disappointment. And also perhaps come out of it with more clarity and strength about who you are and what you stand for, and what it means to go through something like this together. How are we doing? Does that make sense? Yeah? Great. So I have a couple of reflective things for you to do. If you're busy with kids and whatever, just listen. But if you're sitting and have a paper and pen, I'm going to invite you to do a little bit of writing with me. I'm going to take you through a couple of exercises. And the first thing I invite you to do is just take a few minutes, and I'll keep the timer for you, is to just write down what you're thinking and feeling about managing online school right now. You might have some thoughts like, I hate this. This is crazy, right? How can they expect me to do this? How can they expect my children to do this? I'm freaking out. You might be thinking like, I'm so tired of fighting with my kids, or I'm so worried about how they're going to fall behind. I want you to take like 2 minutes and put your paper to pen and just give yourself permission to write some of this down. Write down what is happening, name it, and get it out for a moment. Very cathartic. it might seem really obvious, but some of what I do when I'm coaching adults is coaching them in a way that they can then pass these lessons on to the people around them, whether it's their team at work or whether it's their children. So I want to just remind you that when we name and acknowledge what we're feeling, right, and the thoughts we're having about things, then it changes our experience of them. It gets it out of our head and into the physical form by seeing it on paper. And it's that process that begins the process of us being able to create something different. There's this woman named Carla McLaren who wrote a beautiful book called The Language of Emotions. And she has this practice that I have wholeheartedly adopted, which is called conscious complaining. And she really says that it is very valuable to give voice to all the things that are driving you crazy. And how she describes it is in a very prescriptive way. You call a girlfriend or a friend, a sister or whatever, and you ask permission to consciously complain for a couple of minutes. And you set your timer and you just go nuts. And you just say all the things that are just driving you crazy, right? Whether it was after just a stressful meeting or a stressful day with kids. And the idea is that when we can release the energy of what's frustrating, then we can also put a period at the end of it and be able to move on. When we don't acknowledge what's happening and we don't allow ourselves to process it by complaining or writing about it, then it seeps into every area of our life. So I'm reminding you of something that you might already practice, but if you don't, I'm just giving you permission to, from time to time as you move through these coming weeks, is to just, if you notice it's building up, give yourself the opportunity to just fuss. Just let it rip with someone. And then not stay in that energy, but knowing that when you're expressing it, you're actually being able to help yourself move on to the next phase instead of just being stuck in anger or helplessness or frustration or overwhelm. The second thing that I think is really important and also maybe super obvious, but we don't always practice it, which is radical acceptance. And what I mean by that is accepting exactly what's happening the way it's happening. That doesn't mean that we give up or that we lay down and say, I can't do it anymore and do nothing. It's really an invitation to say, shit, this is big and this is happening. And then it begins to give you a sense of what you can actually control. When we're so busy being frustrated about what is happening, I can't believe this is happening, it shouldn't be happening, none of that helps us be able to move into being able to see this as an opportunity. So the second step is to just say, it is what it is. It's a shit show, or it's so difficult, or I can't imagine being a teacher and a parent right now, right? Like, this is wacky. We are going through a really crazy time. In a world when we face so many things that we can't control, we can control how we react and the meaning that we give things. So it can help us and it can help our children if we can be proactive in making these choices about things that we can control, like how we respond to something, or how we start our morning, or the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening. The only way through is through. And then the third step is to begin to reframe this problem as an opportunity. In my family, we have codified some family values, which just means we wrote down sort of what's important to our family and the values we, desire to live by, even if we're not nailing them 100% of the time. And one of the values we came up with, or I should say I came up with, but everybody else agreed to it.
Recognize a lot of names on here.
Was the value that, sorry, you might want to mute yourself if you're unmuted. The value that challenges are an opportunity to grow. And that isn't something that I always had. I often saw that challenges were something to avoid and spent a lot of my life sort of orchestrating things to make sure I didn't have a lot of difficulties. What I have learned over the years, and also most acutely being a parent, is that our job is not to run ahead and smooth the path for our children. Our job is to equip them with the coping strategies to be able to weather the storm. So there's a big difference in how we're responding to what's happening right now, what's challenging right now, if we're the kind of parent who is committed to like, ooh, I never ever want my kid to be uncomfortable or experience difficulty, right? Like if I'm doing a good job, my kid is always happy. If I'm doing a good job, things go well for my child. And this whole online learning situation is making us realize that that is not going to be possible. If we haven't learned it before, this is a great opportunity to learn it now. That our job as parents isn't to smooth the path for them. It's to walk beside them and equip them with the tools to be able to navigate the ups and downs that inevitably are going to come at them because they are human and because they're going to live in the world. So this is an opportunity, this managing online learning is an opportunity to practice this value and to help us model for our children that challenges are not to be avoided, but challenges are an opportunity to grow. It's a huge perspective shift. So you might start asking some questions such as like, well, what good could come from this? And maybe this has been true for you because I've heard this from some families that this whole experience since March has had some blessings. I've heard some people say it's been fabulous because I got an hour and a half back of my life because I'm not commuting anymore. Or my family has started some really different rituals and routines and habits together because we're together so much, but there's been some good things that have come out of it. Or maybe parents who have been out of the home so much are now having an opportunity to connect with their children in ways that they had not had before because of the demands of work or sports or school. So this is an opportunity to see what good can come from this. It's an opportunity for us as parents and our children to learn new skills. It's an opportunity to update our relationship dynamics. Maybe the way that we had been functioning as a parent isn't going to work as well anymore. It's an opportunity for our kids to develop some independence. So there's a lot of talk lately about maybe things will go back to normal and when can they go back to normal? And I just invite you to consider what might be coming of this experience that's actually beneficial for you and your family. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's kind of like a hard pill to swallow sometimes. I mean, sometimes we have a lot of yeah buts that come up. I can hear them in the back of my head when I say this stuff. Yeah, but, and I just encourage you to let the yeah buts be there, okay? Because when you're trying on something new, it's really common to have some resistance to it. So there's 3 things that I think are important. I already said 3 things and I got 3 more for you. I think it's important at this stage in managing online learning to go back to what your family values. And so I'm going to invite you to take a few moments and just consider, what does your family value? What is most important for your family right now? For example, it may be maybe not that important to your family and your child to be online every single day for every prescribed classroom activity. It may be most important for you and your family right now to take 1 day off a week. or for you to have some alone time, or for you to prioritize connection with your teenager over grades. So I invite you to just sit for a moment with your family, given what's happening in your family situation right now. Like, what is most important for you and your kiddos? And then where does online school fit into that? Is it most important to keep up with every assignment? Or is it most important that you don't end the day in tears? Is it most important that you be able to do your job so that you can earn an income that keeps the roof over the family's head? What's most important right now for you? I'll give you a minute to think about that, or take some notes, or talk to your partner if your partner is nearby. For some parents, this question can bring a lot of clarity. If you're like me, you might be a rule follower. You might be the kind of person who's just always done what they told. I was the kid that sat in the front of the classroom. If I was supposed to be using a pen versus a pencil, I followed the rules. I got a lot of pleasure and meaning out of my life by doing things as I was expected to do them. And sometimes what's expected of us is not what's best for our kids. And each family is so unique, even though we're all experiencing something sort of similar. I think it's really important to center what is most important for your kids, given their age, their stage, your work situation, your family dynamics, your own capacity to be an online parent, tutor, manager, and to center that first. It might bring up some uncomfortable feelings about having to do things differently if you're a rule follower. But what I find for most families is that when they can get grounded in what is true for their family, what's most important for their family, it can serve as a beacon as they navigate these difficult coming weeks or months, because they can keep coming back to what's important to our family. Is it connection versus grades? Is it relationship over results? Right? Because it will be unique to your family. The second thing that I'm going to invite you to do is visualize what you want the next couple of weeks or months to look like for your family. And this is something I often do with my coaching clients, is I invite them to really dream and visualize and imagine, like, a best case scenario. What would they want in terms of their career or their relationships or their health? I think this is really important to do with our families too around online school. Like, what is it that would feel fantastic for you guys right now? What does your morning look like? What does it feel like to go about your activities and do your work and be in and out of your kids' work scenario? What do the evenings look like? What's the energy of your children and your relationship? I know for me, last week, we ditched school on a Monday. My kids did not want to miss school. I made them miss school. And we went hiking. And it was great because it was Monday, so the trails were quiet. And we hiked up far enough to get an epic view, which then felt really like rewarding and accomplishing to them. And once they were out there, they never said one more word about missing school. And they could get their assignments online, and they figured out how to catch up with what they needed to. But there was just one way that I was visualizing, like, how can we use this time, and what does my family need right now? So allow yourself to visualize what you want online school to look like for you. Because if you can't visualize it, it's really hard to know whether you're doing it or creating it. You'll also start to get a sense about what might need to shift. So maybe the year started out okay, but you're seeing now that some things need to be tweaked a little bit, right? Like maybe I need a little bit more frequent check-in with that sophomore because I'm not quite sure they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. Or maybe we need to talk to the teacher about something to reduce my perfectionist child's overwhelm, right? Or maybe we need to do a hiking day once a month. I don't know. It'll be interesting and unique to your family. Knowing what your family values, knowing the vision of what is best for your family and online learning will help guide the decisions that you make in the coming weeks and also help you modulate your reactions to things. If your family's sanity is most important, then you're probably going to be doing the best you can with online learning. If teaching your kids responsibility is most important, then you're probably going to help that child learn how to self-direct. If not falling behind is most important because of your child's learning needs, then making sure your kid is keeping up and learning what they're supposed to is probably going to be most important. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm going to look at your notes here. Yeah, I love this. Family meals together. Yes, family first. Always do our best. Ask. Yeah, health and relationships, safety and sanity, mental health. We're hearing a lot about that too. Like, how do we center our child's mental health? And mental health doesn't mean no struggle. Okay, mental health doesn't mean like they're not struggling. Mental health means I'm not abandoning them in their struggle, right? And I'm providing them with the tools to learn how to navigate difficult situations. Because you can forecast that kid 5 or 10 years into the future and know what that kind of employee looks like. Perhaps you've had to work with someone like that who's used to having everything work out for them, right? Versus someone who's like, this is hard, but I know how to dig deep. Yeah. The third thing that I'm going to invite you to do is to create your plan. So what do you need to do now to make that vision of what you want and to be living more aligned with your values? What do you need to do? What needs to shift? Where might you need to lower some expectations of yourself, or maybe of a child, or maybe of the child's teacher? Right? Maybe you need to opt out of some rigid expectations. Or maybe you need to create some new plans or new goals for your kids who are used to having activities, you know, who are used to getting a lot of reinforcement on the sports field. Or maybe we need to find some other ways for our kids to have that sense of accomplishment. So I invite you to just take a moment and consider what needs to shift. Do you need to pass the baton to your sister-in-law because she's more patient than you are? Do you need to ask for more help? Do you need to order takeout more often so you're not trying to do meals and managing online learning? Do you need to back off and let your kid figure some stuff out for themselves? Do you need to book a therapy appointment for yourself or your child? What do you think you need to do at this stage in the game to help you live more aligned with the values that are important to you, and also get closer to that vision of the best case scenario for online learning for your family. I'll give you a minute to jot some notes. I'm going to walk you through a couple of areas you might want to explore. And if any of these are important to you, you might put a star next to them. I should say, you don't know me very well. A few of you know me, but I made some slides. I was going to show you slides tonight. And I want to be the kind of person who has epic slides. And I just don't like them. I just don't like how it interferes with the flow. And honestly, my slides look like a 5th grade made them. So I was just looking at my notes thinking like, oh yeah, you were supposed to be sharing some images for them to have a visual of. Maybe I'll share one with you at the end if you're lucky. Okay, here's a couple of things to walk through that I think are important at this point in the game. Number 1 is, how is your physical space working for you and your family? And what needs to be tweaked? You'll see here, this is not my home. I'm at my parents' house, way up in the northwest corner of Washington. We came up here for a change of scenery because my family of 4 lives in a less than 1,000 square foot home, which we love. We love our very simplistic European living, but oh my God, it's real small when there's 4 of us all working online from home. So we came up to my parents' house, which has a little bit more space. This is in my dad's office. So I invite you to just take note of like your physical space. How is it working? What needs to tweak? Are the kids doing work on their laptops, on their, on the coffee table? Is that working? Is that not? How about for you? Are you able to get your work done? What needs to shift in your physical space? The second area to examine, I think, at this stage in the game is, how is your schedule working? So kids and adults alike thrive with routine. Our nervous system needs routine to be relaxed. And now online school with the synchronous schedule provides some structure and routine. My question is that working for you and your child? So is there anything about the schedule for your family that needs to be tweaked? Some other things that I'm hearing from families is that they're starting the day together with kind of an opening, like, go get them, right? Maybe we could have Jen come do her hype for us, or you could hype your own family. Like, we got this, like, we can do hard things, and this is not going to determine the rest of our lives. And if it does, we're going to make sure that it's shaping us in the kind of way that we end up being more fantastic human beings because of this experience. What is the tone that you're setting for the day? And how can you build that into your schedule? For my kids, we always review the day's schedule. I write down when I'm coaching, when I'm unavailable, when I'm going to have lunch with them, when dad is, and that's really helpful to them. The third thing I encourage you to look at is revisiting ground rules and expectations, because you might have established some ground rules or expectations that are no longer necessary, or aren't serving you or are creating more chaos, right? More tension. You might need to revisit, like, am I your teacher? Am I your tutor? Am I just like your homework checker? Like, I think about how my kids used to go to school. I didn't know what they were doing all day. I mean, unless I was volunteering or popping into the cafeteria to drop something off, like, you know, I would hear at the end of the day that it was a good day and who did what at recess, but I wasn't involved. And now I find it fascinating that I'm like, what are you working on? Who's in your class? What's your teacher saying? Like, all of a sudden it's in my field of awareness differently. So we've really had to revisit, like, Mom, what's your job? Right? Like, you're not my teacher. I have a teacher. I don't need you to be managing me in that way. But it might be different for you. You might need to revisit, sort of like, hey, it's looking like you need some more support. Let's talk about my job versus your job. The other thing I think is important at this stage in the game is to consider your supports. We are wired to be in community and to live in community. And we don't have that in the same way anymore. Here we are having an online meeting, which is awesome that we can do all of this from the comfort of our home. But too often we're trying to do things on our own. So what might your family need? And even most importantly, what might you need right now to be the kind of parent you want to be and to live aligned with your values? Do you need flexible work hours? Do you need to hire a tutor? Do you need to bribe that sister-in-law to come help you? A lot of people are realizing that they need their own help. They need their own therapist or coach. Some people are like, shit, our marriage is in shambles. Like, we need to do some therapy together. Now is the time to start bringing in the supports, especially as we head into the darker days of winter. Yeah. Not that winter has to be terrible, but, you know, for those of us in the Northwest, we are accustomed to knowing that sometimes the coziness of winter can also bring the heaviness. It's important too to be focusing on what's working. It's so easy for us right now to identify all of the losses and the things that are challenging. And so I challenge you to, even if you're going to do some conscious complaining, which is great, to also spend as much time focusing on what's great, what's going well. Where's the teacher that's going above and beyond? Where's the neighbor kids who are getting together to figure out how to have a study group? How are we taking care of each other, right? Where are you growing and where is your child growing? So focusing not only on what's going well for you, but also pointing that out for your student child as well. And then in closing, I have to always, I always have to say, how are you filling your cup? Our children are going through some really challenging times, but they're not alone. We're in it with them. And I know it's cliche, put your oxygen mask on first, but it's actually true. It's so easy for us as parents to prioritize our children's experience before our own because we're wired to do that. That's how we've survived as a species, is caring and tending for our children. But it was never intended to be without tending to ourselves. And so if your growing edge is to take care of what you need, then I'm going to challenge you to see this as an opportunity to really lean into that practice, to identify those places, those activities, those experiences that fill your cup. For me, I've become acutely aware of the fact that I need a lot more alone time than I thought I needed. And so I've had to be really diligent about carving that out because I'm not able to escape to yoga anymore. And I can't just go fart around at Target for an hour. So we have to get creative. We have to get creative about how we're going to fill our own cup. Because that old saying that's true, right? Like, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. We could say that for dads too. it's really, really important that we be taking care of ourselves. So my invitation to you is to be as gentle as you can with yourself and with those you love, to remember that you're doing a great job, that we will get through this, and that there may be an opportunity here for our kids to experience something that will shape them, but maybe not in the negative ways that we worry about. We know that education is important, that mental health is important, but we also know that learning to survive difficult things is crucial for them to be successful adults. And so I invite you to think about how you can help yourself and your children process the disappointments that are happening, and then pivot towards helping them get their needs met in maybe some new and more creative ways. I have no doubt that you guys will come through this as a community stronger, more clear about what's important for you and for your students, and with a story that is different than this was a shit show and we just got through it. But perhaps, you know, this was particularly challenging, but look at what we've developed from this experience. That's what I got for you. It's 7:20. If you're done, I'm going to say, probably with Jennifer's permission, log off, take care of yourself, hang out with your kids, right? Enjoy a show or do some stretching. Let what we talked about here tonight percolate. Let it seep in. Trust that what you heard will stick with you, the important stuff. And the other stuff, let it go. And know that you have a lot of support here from your administration, from Jennifer, from your community and your friends. And you guys will get through this. If you have any questions, I'm happy to hang out. If you want to talk about specifics, I think Jennifer's hanging out for a few minutes too. And for everybody else who's ready to go, thank you so much for being here, and take good care.
Thank you. That was great.
You're so welcome. Thanks for being here.
I missed the beginning. Can you tell me who you are?
Yeah, sure. I'm a famous Hollywood celebrity. You may recognize me from such movies as, no. I'm a longtime friend of Jennifer McMillan's. I'm a former therapist and now life coach. My background is in mental health for children, youth, and families. Spent many years in private practice, and now coach primarily adults, adults in transition. So career, job, relationships, and sometimes even just transitions such as we're in.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. How about what stood out for you guys? Does anybody want to share anything that stood out? I like to do this at the end of my calls sometimes, because sometimes the nugget that stood out for one person, you know, maybe somebody else missed it. So that would be fun too, if you guys want to share either in the chat window, or if you're not shy and want to unmute yourself and just say, what's something that stood out for you? It's kind of like sharing the cliff notes with each other.
I really like your example of taking Monday off and going hiking. It's not something I really considered before, and that's it's a great idea, you know.
Life's short, Matt.
Yeah.
These kids are only little for a while.
And the weather's only good for so long right now.
2 more days, I think. No.
I think so too.
That's great. That's awesome. Anyone else?
I'll say that's sort of what stood out for me too. But more like, we've been trying to do a weekend getaway, but one of us always has something. And I don't know why this hasn't occurred to me, but we're all working remotely. So we should just go during the entire week and work from there, including kids. It's like literally never crossed my mind. So thank you for that.
Yes, there is Wi-Fi at the beach. There's Wi-Fi. Look, we just came to my parents' house just because they have more property. They've got sheep and chickens. My kids are doing online school all day. I'm working, but we're just in a different environment. So it just kind of mixes it up a little bit. It's a great idea. Take the show on the road if you can.
I think it's really great to think about, like, not only shifting the space that you're in, but also like revisiting those ground rules and expectations of each other during the day. I think school started and we all just like went with it, you know, and just doing what we thought we were supposed to do, instead of like, now we're in like a month and we're like, okay, so where have we been? How have we landed? Who does this work for and what doesn't work, right? Like, nobody ever stopped to ask each other that in this household, you know, and my son's in 2 households. He goes back and forth all week. And so, you know, just trying to get like some sort of like, I want my kid to be like, Mom, like, you can back off. Like, I want him to be able to say that, or like, Mom, like, I need you to wake up earlier and feed me, or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
you know, so that's really great. Like, just to check in and like adjust those expectations of each other, so that, you know, and then you might find out, of course, that the expectations are not realistic, and then you do it again, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah. But you bring up a good point too, for those kids that are in 2 different homes, how valuable it is to sort of revisit, like, what's happening at Dad's house, what's happening at our house, how's that working for you? How can we make that, you know, a smoother transition, or, right? Like, that's so important. And also permission to sort of mix it up a little bit, right? Like, we did our best just getting in and figuring it out and making sure we got the software. You're going to notice that the teachers are doing the same thing, right? They're going to have a teacher planning day coming up where they're just like, whoa, that what we are doing is not working. You know, we need to revise. So permission to be on the other end of that with your family too, saying like, it's not working this way so well.
Yeah, and I will say, for the other parents, if any of you have this like dual household situation,
Yes.
I've had to talk to a couple of the teachers because some of the grading was really weird, and I had to let them know that like, these are days when Hudson is traveling from one house to another, and so the homework timing is a little off for us. And of course they're like completely understanding of it, and so take that pressure off of yourself too by just being completely transparent, like, this day sucks for us, so if it's late by 2 hours, I'm really sorry, but that's just the reality of life, because we're transitioning households or something. But
yeah, great reminder. Yes, those teachers like communication, we know that. I'm seeing a lot of takeaways in the chat window too, like this reminder to reframe the challenge as an opportunity. That's so empowering to us. It takes us out of the victim mode into a like, no, we write the story here. We're going to write it as our family. You know, it was the year that we learned, I don't know, for my family, it's the year that we revisited every single old season of The Amazing Race together. We've been all over the world the last couple of months. I don't ever watch TV with my children. I'm just not a TV watcher, right? But man, have we had some fun evenings together talking about world culture and, you know, how Americans act in other places and where we would want to go. And so there's a lot that can come out of this too.
I just want to say I appreciate you pointing out giving the teachers grace, being a teacher myself.
Oh, yes, Hillary.
I'm trying to teach children and having my own kids at home. And I think one of the takeaways for me was revisiting the values and just establishing those values, like talking with my children about our values. As you were saying it, my husband and I were just sharing like, this is my value. And he's like, this is my value. And we were both like, those are great, but we've never really talked to our children about those. And if we have our weekly family meetings, we need to be, you know, sharing those and talking about those with them. So.
I highly recommend, I teach a workshop on family meetings, and the very first thing that I teach families how to do is to codify their family values. Mm-hmm. We often sort of are practicing them and living them, but there's something that changes dramatically when we write them down. And we have ours in a dorky piece of white, like one of those big sticky pads on the back of our kitchen door. It's like so obvious, you know, and the kids have decorated it and whatever, but it's right there to remind us like how we want to roll.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how we start our
Mhm.
family meetings is by reviewing those values, because it gets us aligned with the same vision, you know, and it helps us show where we're out of integrity. That's great, Hillary. Thank you. And yes, you're so right. The teacher parents right now, that makes me feel like I have nothing to fuss about. Anything else?
Lael, this is
Yes.
Gwen.
Hi,
I'm
Gwen.
wondering if you could say something, if we still have a moment or two, with
Sure.
regard to friendships.
Mm.
We've had lots and lots of family time over the past 6+ months, and what our son is really craving right now is time with friends, time with children his own age.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something we can't give him right now, and as much as we want to be able to do that. And so that is our big struggle right now, is dealing with that, because it's not something that we have control over.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say something about that?
It sucks. I'm kidding. How old's your son, Gwen?
He's 11, sixth grade.
Yeah, okay, that's the same age as my kids too. Yeah, I think that this again comes back to personal values and personal comfortability. I know I have some girlfriends who have quarantined with some other kids and they have been hanging out together. Our children have not been hanging out. That's just been our level of comfortability. I am fortunate in that I have 2 girls the exact same age, so for better or for worse, they have some company. So I think it's a deeply personal decision about when and how you manage contact with other kids. That being said, I think that we can be really creative about how we maintain connection. I've had kids go on bike rides with other kids, you know, like around the school playground where they're not close to each other. I ended up starting a mother-daughter group in the midst of all of this. And we can't even gather together. So we've been meeting on Zoom and playing games together with the girls. It's less than ideal, trust me. Like, it's not that awesome, but at least the kids are feeling connected to each other. And then my kids don't have devices yet. That's something we're waiting a little bit longer on, but I did install an app on the iPad that allowed them to send messages and play games with their friends. And so that has been a way I've watched my kids sort of like say, can I check in with my friends tonight? And then they'll sit on the couch for 15 minutes or whatever and check in. Now that might be a girl thing more than a boy thing. I don't know, but those are some thoughts that come to mind. But it's challenging, and also it won't last forever. And we have to remember that and do the best we can with what we have. If anybody else has ideas or thoughts or feedback for Gwen, you should put it in the chat window, because I'm surely not the only person who has something to say about it. Yes. Can you talk about screen time? I'm asking. And again, if you guys need to go, feel free to go. If you want to stay, that's fine too. We'll take a couple more minutes. Can you talk about screen time? We've always been careful with screens, and now it's screens all day. Oh my God. Which has given the kids the feeling that screens are okay, really, for almost every part of their day. Yeah, and we found ourselves setting some limits around, like, you don't really need a screen to do some physical movement. Yeah, I think this is important. Again, all of these things are going to kind of snowball. And once you start looking at one, I think about like pulling the thread, you're going to kind of see where all of these other things are linked up. So I'm a big fan of honest conversations and collaborative conversations with kids, even little kids. And you can start with something like, hey, I got a concern. Here's what's coming up for me as a parent. I'm having a lot of concern about how much screen time we're having right now. Does anybody else have that concern? No. It's great. Wish I had more. Yeah, okay, well, it's still really bothering me as a parent. I have a lot of concerns about it. I'd like us to have time in our family where we're not focused on a screen. So what are your ideas about how to maybe have some screen-free time? And put it on the kid. Let the kid do some thinking or brainstorming, because you can be really surprised sometimes what our kids will come up with that we don't even have to come up with. They might say, well, maybe we could have screen time for fun like 2 nights a week, but maybe 2 nights a week we do something as a family. Or maybe 2 nights a week I can have such and such, and then maybe this other time. And they might come up with something that doesn't work for you. It might be like way too much screen time for you. But what you're doing in that process is establishing the kind of family that can have collaborative conversations to find a solution that works for everyone. Oftentimes what we do as parent is just like decide how it's going to be and then lay it down and then just like watch the shit hit the fan. And then we get scared to ever set a limit because the shit hits the fan, right? So if we can get a little bit more like, hey, I got this thing, I'm on your same team, I know you might as a kid think you want more screen time and I'm thinking maybe less, how do you think we can find a solution? So you're modeling collaborative problem solving, you're inviting the kid to the table to solve their own problem so you don't have to do so much work as a parent. And you're teaching the kids skills to be able to think through sort of how do I meet someone in the middle when I got this parent who's kind of bent out of shape about screen time. Another thing that I like to tell parents is make life more interesting off screen. So if you got nothing to offer that 10-year-old or that 15-year-old, then yeah, being online is going to be way more interesting. But if you're like, dude, I set up a target in the backyard, want to do some target shooting, or hey, anybody want to skip school and go on a hike, or oh my gosh, I got stuff for hot fudge sundaes, who wants to like, right? Like when you are providing a life outside of what's happening on the screen, you'd be surprised at how much kids want to engage with that. So sometimes you don't have to be a hard ass as much as you need to look at like, what is the screen providing that maybe I could be offering? And for some people, it's hard to wind back the screen rules. And so having some of those family meetings where you're establishing some new norms and maybe even taking it step by step, knowing that by January you want to be in a different place with screens, but to cut your kid off cold turkey was, you know, probably too much for maybe your family. For me, I've been so clear with my kids. I'm like, don't even talk to me about a phone. Don't even talk to me about a device. Now, I might get them a device earlier than 8th or 9th grade, but in their minds, it's not even an issue. Like they don't even get to talk about it yet. And I would much rather have much clearer boundaries in that way, that then I can seem like a rad parent when on like their 13th birthday or something. You know, I'm like, you guys have earned it because I can trust you or whatever. I know that's difficult when there haven't been those boundaries, but if you are at the beginning stage of setting them, I encourage you to set them and hold them because you can always give a little bit more. It's much harder to take it back. Yeah, you guys are posting some great ideas on there. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for helping each other. Playing online games. Yes, here we are, more screen time, but hey, there's a lot of kids who connect by playing together. It's awesome. Using screen time as a motivation or as a currency. Yeah, you can earn it by doing other things. It's great. All right, I think we're at time. Let's wrap it up. You guys are great.
Thank you so much, Lael.
You're so welcome.
You are so awesome. So I really want to thank you so much for bringing all of your wisdom and just, you know, quite frankly, just your direct honesty about how this is a difficult situation and that one of the things that we can control is the way that we decide to story it and co-narrate it with our kids. And so thank you for all of those reminders. And I wrote 4 pages of notes in a giant marker. It was the only thing I could find, but it was awesome. So thank you so much. And everybody
so welcome.
Still listening, remember that we have this taped and recorded. And so if you want to tell people, like I'm going to tell so many people, like you have to watch this, it will be available on our Camas School District Wellness page. So thank you so much. Take care of yourselves and look forward to seeing you again at the next wellness event.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It was great. Very helpful.
Thank you. That was
Thank
awesome.
you.